Hey everybody, welcome back to the House of L. This is our episode for the Peacemaker Season 2 episode, Ignorance is Chris. I'm Derek.
I'm William.
How are you, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I rushed to you were texting me as the episode aired last night. Like, we called it. And I was like, I hadn't seen it yet. Don't spoil anything.
You called it specifically, I think. I tried to throw cold water on the visit to Belle Reve, and I was like, I just don't know. That feels like too big, and I was wrong, and you were 100% right. Not only that's more than a cameo. That is like a extended scene.
That was a full-fledged guest starring role in that episode for Mr. Nicholas Hoult. Between the time of recording for the 5th episode, which we did late, and now this one, the Superman DVD has released, which is I'm a huge physical media guy, you know this, and so I absolutely love having this. My steelbook is still somewhere in the wild, has not delivered.
I'm so jealous you even have a steelbook. I totally missed.
I don't want to jinx it because it's not here yet, and I got a feeling any day now I'm going to get an email. It's like, we canceled it.
No, I just the whole sort of like, if you want a steelbook, you really have to pre-order it the second after you see the movie thing. It's just like not something I have really been
I don't like
aware of. Yeah, I don't love it. It was interesting. I was listening to the Big Picture episode last week about physical media, and it's one of those things. All steelbooks now are also like $50, which is so different from how I normally buy Blu-rays, which is to wait for a Criterion sale and just grab a 4K for, $25 or whatever it is. But this is one of those that I really did miss seeing or miss grabbing the Superman one. And I digress, but anyway.
No, you're good. I just hope it shows up. But I also am not the kind of person to have patience. So when I saw that it wasn't being delivered anytime soon, I went out and grabbed the lenticular 4K. But all that to say is, I don't like this new trend of the digital coming out so soon after the theatrical. That window now being shortened so much, and you get special features, but those special features aren't on the DVD. You only get them on the digital release, but they're not available on the digital release until the DVD drop. Like this, I absolutely love Warner Brothers, but I feel they have really botched this one, because the fact that I can't watch the director's commentary on my DVD is bonkers to me. Much less the gag reel or the deleted scenes. So all those dropped with the DVD release, but you can only watch them on the digital release, even though they didn't drop until the... Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I say all that to say, between 5 and 6, I was able to watch the recording 5 and 6, that is, I was able to watch the director's commentary, and the scene at the Pentagon with Ultraman and Lex, Gunn mentions reusing that set for the season finale of Peacemaker, which we've seen those shots with Sydney and Otis in that same Pentagon briefing room. So I assume now we know that's coming for 8. If you've seen the trailer for 7, it looks like we're hinting at Sydney being released under Flag's care because of the conversation that happened between him and Lex there. I guess he's the one person that can track the device, or what everybody's using to, whatever this alien tech is, the entrance to the bleed. We haven't really even given a name for the portal itself, but the bleed technology, trying to be able to track that, which I was like, could Mr. Terrific not probably do that?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
You can say. We'll probably have just as much fun with Otis and Sydney. And they're probably, at least Sydney, I would guess, not too happy with being incarcerated for Lex, because he sure was not in alignment with him there toward the end of the film.
It'll be interesting to see how much the show touches upon that. But yeah, I think this speaks to one of the things we chatted about at the very beginning of the season is the benefit of having Gunn as the head honcho for all of this, is
Right.
that he can make things like this happen pretty easily. I think simultaneously shooting Peacemaker and Superman together made that even easier, but it is one of those moments where you can just being able to logistically ensure that that happens is a really cool way of getting this to happen. I mean, it's was I'm trying to think of, the realm of possibility of, like, how cool it would have been if in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. we had actually seen Captain America show up, right?
Right.
And I know that
Right.
ended up being its own kind of hodgepodge weird situation, but it just speaks, I think, to the ways in which I love that Gun is kind of continuing to build out this world. It also lets us see Lex in a different register, and I think one of the things we've spoken about a lot is people who watch Superman who are maybe coming into this and the tonal kind of difference between that. I don't know, I never thought I would hear Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor talking about getting, um, what sort
That
of
yeah, yeah.
what sort of noises he's hearing while he's incarcerated at Belle Reve. I don't think it did necessarily repeat the full string of
Prison
dialogue there.
prison activities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Just, just things that go on there,
Yeah.
which was and I love that we get to see these kind of 2 different tones. That Lex did not feel totally incongruous with what we've seen before, but he's definitely more frustrated, more annoyed, more irritated. Jumping
Walking
into
with walking with a cane, still
yes,
injured
which
from the crypto incident, which we've only
yeah,
been, I think, 5 weeks out from the time of the movie at this point, but he's already been sentenced to 265, years in prison.
I mean, legislation moves or justice moves swiftly in
That's right.
DCU, it seems. Did you take the offer that Rick sort of posits to him at the end as a Suicide Squad related thing, or as just a kind of you're now under US government control and we're gonna
I
be
I
watching you closely?
I kind of, we've talked about how this is gonna set up Man of Tomorrow, and I was like, "Okay, well, this is now moving him to a safer facility, one just outside Metropolis, no less." And, yeah, being at the beck and call of Argus or whatever entity may be pulling the strings at this point, but I can see the writing on the wall of where they're going with this, with him, with the uneasy alliance between him and Superman, and them having to partner up and work together, um, based on whatever threat may be looming in Man of Tomorrow.
Brainiac.
Brainiac. We've theorized Brainiac. I think that's probably a safe bet, but um, I definitely got that you know a chance at redemption was what Flag said, and Lex said he
Yes.
was listening. So, whatever makes him look better in the public eye after the events of Superman this summer, he's going to go all for. I know we've kind of jumped toward the end here, but and talking about the stuff that we did get right, I wanted to also make mention of things that happened off screen with that director's commentary and involving Lex and everything because he was in the episode. I also love that we got a really dark version of his theme. Of course,
Yeah.
as soon as he said he was going to Belle Reve and we saw somebody walking down that hallway, I knew, just like, Leo pointing gif.
Mhm.
I was like, I knew what was coming, but also just really cool to have a dark version of his score playing, which his score was already dark in the movie, but it was very threatening sounding version of it as he was coming into the interrogation center there. Pleasantly surprised to see him, loving all this interconnectivity. Um, it was only a 35-minute episode again, but we knew from everything Gunn said it was going to be crazy. It was.
So can we talk a little bit about that? I
Yeah.
had one of the immediate discussions that I saw in the aftermath of the episode, just logging into Twitter last night, was there's a writer for Forbes who I really admire. He does a lot of video game writing, but also does some pop culture stuff too. But Paul Tassi was talking about kind of the expectations that Gunn had set for this episode and how crazy it was. In I think sometimes that can lead audiences to maybe feel let down if the actual execution of the episode isn't quite what fans had built up in their head. I think
Sure.
part of that is also multiplied by the fact that fans solved this particular conclusion 4 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
So the question then becomes is, do you feel that this was accurately as executed as Gunn had hyped it up? Because I think that is I'm seeing some pushback related to that this was not, to even some of the hypothesizing that we did at the very beginning of the season where I was talking about, like, a new version of the Suicide Squad, or, which
Yeah.
I think even during that time we admitted was probably a little far-fetched, but I'm just worried if the power of the ending is a little dampened because everybody figured it out already. I have my own thoughts about that, but
Sure.
that seemed to be some of the prevailing sentiment was like, this was not nearly as crazy as Gunn had sold it, perhaps, which it's his job to sell this, right? So of course he wants to make it seem like it's maybe bigger than it is. But I think that is kind of the central question that I'm curious to have a discussion about.
I do go back to and rereading what he said about it early on, and it was again, how he perceived how much some of the favorite thing he's ever done, and I think we talked about that last week, that whether or
Yeah.
not you want to get into the weeds of whether or not it's the best thing he's ever done or the craziest thing he's ever done or anything like that. It's more or less just him saying it's his favorite thing he's ever done, and while it is important to the series, to the DCU as a whole, to Superman, to Man of Tomorrow, to what's going on, directly just with these characters that we're working with in Peacemaker and not even abroad. Uh, I you know we watched 5 episodes in advance, so it's been over a month now since we had a new episode, I
Yeah, I
guess.
mean, you watched
I
them,
mean,
I
I
think.
watched. I didn't watch all the way. I did watch, but even still, it's been. I watched 4 and 5 together, so it's been a few weeks. But I know a lot of people burned them, early
Right,
on, and
right.
it's been so
Yeah.
far out. And we saw the writing on the wall with what was going on over there. That something just wasn't fitting right. So, and a lot of people called that. It was very apparent there were no people of color anywhere, that something just seemed off, but that Chris was so blinded to everything. And then, Amelia shows up, who is already skeptical of this place and is not wearing those blinders and can tell easily that something is off from within being there just a few, one car ride, and she was already sold on there being an issue. Um, I don't feel like this is it, though. I know he didn't
No.
say 7, he said 6 and 8. Whether or not whether or not David shows up as our Superman or shows up as an Earth X version of Superman, that still, I could see that happening now that we've had Lex. It's like, okay, we can also have David, but it's going to be. But I also don't see them making a whole new suit for one appearance for him in 8 of playing a different character. I'm skirting the issue of your bigger question of, do you feel this was a letdown or not. And I wasn't, having seen these in advance and even guessing a lot of this. I thought it was really well done. I was still tense in those final. As soon as Adebayo looked out that door and was like, "You want to go for a walk?" I was like, "Mm-mm." Like I was already feeling. I was already, just when they started cleaning up the kitchen, was worried about their safety. I was like, "You need to get into, lock yourself in other Chris's room or something." Um, so as soon as she started strolling down the street, I was very fearful for what was coming for her, especially when there was 30 people running at her. I thought it was just going to be 1 or 2 people that might spot her when we called that. Um, I think there was a lot to. First of all, this was a very Looney Tunes episode. Like, there was so much like zaniness going on. The bit with stealing the money from Adrian while his back was turned, and the like hijinks music that screeched to a halt as soon as he turned back around. Like there was so much Looney Tunes esque stuff. There was so much stuff like that.
Even the face melting thing at the very beginning, I think, is like
I didn't
that
like
was
that at all.
very Tim and Eric to me, which I enjoyed.
Yeah.
It feels, but it's cool to have that. I think in like major piece of pop culture entertainment feels like a little bit of an overstatement, but still at the same time to have some weirder comedic sensibilities to this too. I think is one absolutely in Gunn's wheelhouse, but two I think works exceedingly well for the show, and I think
Mhm.
all that stuff is still like rooted in character. Like, of course, Adrian wouldn't clean up his stash house. And of course, everybody there is broke as a joke and immediately would just not even think twice. They'd be like, who
Right.
cares if it's blood money? Like, we're all broke. So
Right.
$1,000, $10,000, $20,000, how much how much they end up grabbing, whatever the amount is going to make a huge difference to them if they're able to survive all of this. Right. But I think the other thing too, to get back to the original question a little bit is, I don't think just because I know how something is going to end doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily invalidate kind of the journey or the execution
Absolutely.
of that. I
Absolutely.
know for case in point, like in covering these things, I definitely think there's a certain amount of searching that I do amongst Reddit and other places to sort of get a general understanding from scoopers or leakers where things may be headed, right? I just think in that perspective, it helps me as I'm writing pieces to have a general sense of kind of here are things that I should maybe be keeping an eye out for that we can use as kind of hypothesizing towards things or even using my own experience within years and years and years of reading comics to sort of nudge towards these things. And if they're correct,
Mhm.
that's great. If they're wrong, then that's fine. In caveating it that way. But one of the things was for Endgame, I definitely was spoiled by seeing some of those leaked clips that were online, but the moments in the theater are still absolutely electric, right?
Mhm.
And I think what was so well done about this is that one, I think the reveals and the way that it is paced, I think excellently done. I think cutting from Adrian to Adebayo to Amelia and
John, yeah.
and and Chris and even the stuff with Economos, right? Like the way in which everything is kind of pitched towards that end, building up to the moment where Chris sees the flag, which is again is something that I think was I wasn't sure if it was actually going to be a full on swastika, and so it's like I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. The excitement of sort of like seeing that it was actually
I get
that
it.
is
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's one of those things.
Well,
It's
it had to be some iconography that people
immediately recognizable,
immediately
sort of. Yeah,
recognized that wasn't like some weird symbol that had to be explained. You don't need any explanation for how
no,
horrible that is and how,
no.
even the music cue, like you know how
Yeah.
bad things are now.
But also, I also love that Gunn is not afraid to go there. I think we've talked there's been a lot of discussion about, auteurism just in general. There's a new Paul Thomas Anderson movie out this week. So we're talking about white guys with visions, right? And I sincerely love as we head more and more towards a fascistic state that this is Nazism and exploring that and exploring why it is bad and why it's great to kill Nazis
Mhm.
and is a core tenet of James Gunn's work in the DCU at this point. It is, it's been a part of Peacemaker season 1. It's a huge part of Creature Commandos. And
Mhm.
here it is again. I would love to see GI Robot show up in here. I would imagine that in Earth 10 that GI Robot has ceased to exist a long, long time ago. But
Yeah. Or never made
it's
it in the first
or
place.
exactly right. So,
Yeah.
but this being a core tenet of things that Gunn is interested in exploring, I think is I don't want to go so far as to say it's like punk rock, but at the same time, it is cool that like a major piece of comic book intellectual property is like so insistent on exploring this over and over and over again. I think that's really, really cool. Um, to sort of
Well,
continue to deal.
somebody needs to be out in the forefront saying things that it's bad right now. Like
Yeah,
because
exactly,
everywhere else you
exactly.
look at, you're not getting that message. I feel
No,
like at the moment.
and again, to do this in the piece of in a piece of populist television, on an HBO Max television series is cool. Like I think it's
Hmm.
awesome that we're just continuing to reiterate that message again to your point in a time where like we really need that reiterated for some reason. But I still think the actual reveal of that particular moment is still, like, exceedingly well done, and I
Mhm.
think the other thing too is, like, it is all of that stuff comes in a way where it's also rooted in character, which I think is the
Oh,
biggest thing,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think, having Amelia be immediately smart enough to know, like, something's not right and this is the reason why, having Chris immediately have the sinking realization that, like, this utopia that he's built up in his head is just, like, absolutely a sham. I think putting Economos in danger in that way, Adebayo in danger in that way, even Adrian's whole conversation to like have that be just like the Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man thing, rooted in really fun moments, but then having everything be the same except for their affection for Chris Smith, I think is a fun wrinkle in that regard.
Mhm.
So yeah, was all of this predictable? Sure. Does that invalidate the satisfaction of seeing this come to life in the way in which that is executed? Absolutely not. I think it'd be
No.
one of those things that might feel a little worse if it wasn't as thrilling to kind of see everybody put the pieces together in real time. And so I think that's really where I land with it. But I think it's an important question to ask is, you know, as with any show that has a tendency to be over theorized, is like, does the expectation you've built up in your head is that invalidated or validated based upon what the actual events are? I think
Yeah.
that's the other benefit of having a show be week to week is that we have an opportunity for fans and viewers, and critics to sort of theorize in this way
Mhm.
and get people talking. I think it's been really cool to see the discussions for this online and how quickly people figure this out. I think that's how you know that the show is resonating with people, even if it is meant to be, or even if it does end up coming across a little bit as like a show to be solved versus something to just be watched and experienced.
And I think also, there was so much in it that obviously humor and to the Looney Tunes point, zaniness and stuff that was happening that bought us in even more, but we've been waiting for this shoe to drop. Whether we were 100% right or not, we knew some element of what was going on over there was wrong. So we've been waiting for that shoe to drop. So it's still hit emotionally for me. Uh, even going back and listening to what we've talked about in the last few weeks between you and I, it it's still like I was hook, line, and sinker for the whole time. So no, I guess is the long answer to your original question is it did to me at least personally, it did not invalidate how well this has been executed from week to week. And I'm 100% with you that I do miss the idea of a weekly television show getting to solve something together as a group versus somebody binging something in an afternoon by themselves and not having that kind of experience with others.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about just uh the Harcourt Chris conversation?
That
Do you
was the
think Gunn said, I think had some comments around that was a scene that made him cry. I can certainly understand why. I think that is probably Jen Holland's like best performance.
hmm
I think that is something that like I've really come to. I really enjoyed her performance in season one, but I feel like she has been given so much more to do in season two, and I think the full emotional arc of the season really rests on her and Cena and their ability to pull that off. And I just thought the work from the two of them in that moment is spectacular. They're talking around things and also talking about things directly. And what they're saying and not saying, I think, is just the way that that scene is brilliantly constructed. I think I was really, really impressed with it. It's in some ways kind of reminds me a little bit. It's not as flashy as this, right? As the Lois and Superman conversation, where
hmm
they're talking about a lot of things without necessarily talking about them. In this case, I think it's a little bit more direct than that, but just the whole moment I think was like extraordinarily well executed.
Yeah. No, I think she did. I think they both did a phenomenal job. I can understand Gunn writing and directing that. That obviously being very emotional for him as well, but I thought she just did outstanding, and obviously playing double duty in this episode. Um, I do kinda go back to the whole thing we conversation that we used to have on Smallville's House of L about, when Bizarro was pretending to be Clark and sleeping with Lana, and we were like, "Is that doesn't feel that's not right. That doesn't feel
Yeah.
good." I had a little bit of that skeeviness, in that scene of the 2 of them in bed, in this episode as well. I was like, "Ah, she doesn't know he's somebody else. That's
Yeah.
awkward." But,
Problematic at best, I would say.
problematic. But he killed him though, so it's fine. He took over. Um, but yeah, now now with her knowing, with the Earth X version knowing, that's not good. Um, Chris's dad now knowing because John couldn't keep his mouth shut while he was getting stabbed. Uh, I mean, they're all going to be hunted at this point. It feels like, to me at least, it won't just be Adebayo; it'll be all of them
No, which I
being
think
tracked
brings
down.
the group together in a great way. I mean, that's how you raise the stakes, I think, for this coming in. And I think the other thing too is it allows, from a narrative perspective, to kind of unify, not kind of, to truly unify the group after 5 weeks of being so disparate and being so broken apart. This being the unifying thing that brings the 11th Street kids together again, I think
Mhm.
is that's a cool way to I think bring the group together as we head into these final stretch of episodes is to see everyone back in the mix of that, and then hopefully that'll carry over into the finale a little bit as well. But it's also again for tonally and narratively for the arc of the season, it's a nice moment to finally have everybody back together in this point,
Yeah.
and what better than Nazism to bring everybody is a
Yeah.
rallying cry to form against at that point, but
I
it
I
feels
thought
welcome after, again, how long we've spent away
yes.
from really everybody to have everybody back on the same page again is a great, great grace note.
And I say that to say I thought everybody was at the top of their game in this episode. We
Yeah,
obviously some very briefly with Fleury and Bordeaux. We didn't get as much time with those as but we got a lot of time with the our main protagonist and antagonist either way with our
characters
11th Street kids, yeah.
are leads.
uh and when Chris walks in Argus and sees his Amelia, obviously he knows because he just left the other one, but the look they give each other and then everything that conversation between them was just phenomenally executed by the two of them. But I have to give Holland all her flowers for that, because that the whole, the destructive nature and her trying to, show how bad off she was, and him continuing to say, "I still love you in spite of all those things," and uh, in the midst of, rather, of all those things, not really even in spite of. I thought she did great. I thought he did great. And for an episode that turned so dark so quickly,
Mhm.
there's probably more humor in this episode than I think the 5 before it.
Yeah, I mean, I still think the whole
I laughed a lot through this one.
yeah, the whole Economos Flurry exchange in episode 2, I still think is one of my favorite out and out comedic
Yeah,
bits of
yeah,
the season. But I do think a lot of that comes from Adrian, which we had lamented last week about him being very much MIA. And for someone who I think has taken a little bit of a backseat this season, he is on Front Street this time around,
yeah,
which I think
yeah.
is great, and I hope that that continues through the rest of these last couple of episodes, because it is one of those things I do think the it's a tough line to toe, I'm sure, for Gunn as a writer, because you don't want him to just constantly his particular comedic energy has to be deployed, I think, very sparingly. And so I think kind
Yes.
of saving it for one episode where we are really just going full tilt. Like if we're thinking about Peacemaker as a show and each part of the cast as instruments in a recording of a song, you don't want to turn the Adrian dial up too much,
Mm-mm.
right? Because it threatens to overwhelm everything else. But this was the right amount, I think, because of how downplayed he has been through the rest of the season.
He extremely, and we still had good bits, I think, from everybody. I mean, soon that the bit with his mom was really
Right.
good. The alligator stuff was really good, between him and John. And obviously everything with him going on his own, brazenly walking into Earth X version's house of himself and
Well,
just
even just the
making
excitement he
himself at
has
home.
of unlocking the door as each one of
Well,
those kind of go through.
the chipmunk being a squirrel on the front porch, just everything that he is just so childlike in his wonderment about, and then finding himself, and then the two of them automatically becoming best friends. I mean, it was very Step Brothers,
Yeah.
it was John C. Riley and Will Ferrell that, if we just become best friends,
Well, even the I
between the two
it's
of
so
them.
f it's I know this is, like, so nerdy, but the whole, like, acknowledgement of the, like, Spider-Man pointing meme too was,
Right.
like, very funny. That's not something that I would foresee, like, Marvel making a reference to Batman, right? But at the same time, like,
Well, I
it's
thought about, Eternals, they talk about Superman in
oh,
in
they did do that.
Eternals,
It's been such a long
I
time
was
since I've
kinda
seen
like
it.
"Oh, that's funny how we've kind of crossed the Rubicon there for
Cross the
both of these
streams on
2."
that one.
Yeah, across the
Uh,
streams, yeah.
yeah, I think that stuff is really well done, and to see them play against each other in that particular moment, I think is super fun. So yeah, I'll be curious to see how the vigilantes end up playing in the mix of things next time around. I think if there is an understanding between the two of them, that's a pretty potent threat to go up against the rest of uh the top trio, right? But
Mhm.
it would be interesting to see. I think that's the thing that I'm most curious about is how does this resolve itself, right? Is this something where they just escape and that's it and they know not to go back in there? Or is this a situation where, Chris is going to have to kill his brother and his father again
Right,
and what the
right.
emotional repercussions of that are? I think there's a lot of different directions for the season to go in as far as how it concludes. And I'm curious to see if they do repeat those beats, kind of the emotionality that might take on Chris. If there's a way to do that that makes it feel a little bit different than what we did last season.
Yeah.
I think really it's exciting to think about the narrative possibilities of like where we're headed with this stuff. And also knowing that like at some point we have the Argus element of it. Amelia is in that office at Argus now. I really feel like we've got to have a moment between her and Rick, even if it is this alternate dimension version of him. I think that would be really, really important. I also think I would love to see a moment between senior and junior, even if it is again codified or not codified, but even if it is under the guise of this kind of Nazi Earth, right? Like
Mhm.
that kind of stuff I think is a rich foundation to do some character exploration on. I don't know. We're running out of time. We only have, depending on the
2
runtime of these next couple
yeah, less
episodes,
than 2
2 hours
hours
at
left.
max. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think we'll see Flag Jr. again? I'm glad they addressed that in their conversation this and really, like, fully addressed it. It wasn't just
Yeah.
a passing reference, like, they got into it there for a minute.
I think if I had to choose between the two, I think there's a more meaningful opportunity to come from a meeting between junior and senior than there is between Amelia and Rick, just
Mhm,
because I think so much of Senior's arc from Creature Commandos and then also into this, but really in Creature Commandos is about him kind of coming to terms with that loss in such a significant
mhm.
way. To me, I think that is the more emotionally resonant conversation I would like to see. But, I think at this point, uh, we're based on I don't want to do too much of this in these last couple of episodes, but based on the trailer that we saw for next week's episode, it looks like they're going to be kind of back in the bleed relatively quickly. I'm sure there's a large chunk of the episode will be spent kind of regathering everybody and trying to escape. But, I just don't know if that dovetails with Argus showing up at the exact same time. And then is it
Yeah.
going back in there to remove that Earth? Is it going, so I just think it's a little too early to tell at this point whether or not that will come together. But that is something that if we're wish casting for these next couple episodes, that is something I would really like to see from a narrative perspective.
I read a little leak. That is hard to say. About 7. Nothing too spoilery. Um, enough that I feel okay saying it here because I think it's kind of like, well, yeah, duh, kind of stuff.
But if you
I
don't
did
want to
see,
hear, just
but if you
press
don't want
fast
to hear,
forward
just fast
five
forward 2
seconds.
seconds. I saw Judo Master will be uncovering the history of this Earth
Mm.
on his end, and then Vigilante would be Adebayo's bodyguard.
It definitely looks like there were moments in, I think some of that was maybe used kind of in the trailer for this, but there was a shot, and I have not gone back to watch this a second time, so maybe it is in here and I just can't remember. But there was a
Let me
shot
look.
of Vigilante kind of with both guns up, standing behind her, in front of her, kind of like walking through something. So yeah, I mean, if there's anybody that makes sense. Now, the thing I'm curious to know is which Vigilante is that? Is it ours or is it Earth
Right,
X's at this point?
right.
Um,
Because those suits are exactly the same.
exactly the same. The only difference between the two of them is the Earth X version of Adrian is wearing uh, gold frames, and our version is wearing silver framed glasses. There's a
Okay,
very
I
subtle
didn't
difference
catch
between the
that.
two of them. Somebody on Twitter shared it this morning. That's the only way that I caught it, but that is the subtle difference between the two of them. I'm sure that they will come up with other ways in the
Hmm.
episode to sort of differentiate between the two, whether it's again separating them and but in the same space, I'm sure there will need to be some sort of differentiator between one wearing the mask and one not wearing the mask, so we know who
Hmm.
is who. But we'll see. So, I mean, I that is one of those things from a world building perspective, I would love to know a little bit more about how this particular Earth came to be, alternate
Yeah.
history stuff like that. You know, you and I have spoken about some of the cheeky little differences that they've had with this kind of stuff. I mean, even this week, the idea that Mick Jagger was part of the Beatles.
I really want to listen to Halloween. Like I
Yeah.
really want to know what they're about. Even the this is where my mind goes. When Adrian walked in and found the Cheerios box, I
Yeah.
immediately thought of the infamous Cheerios box on the Kent family table in
Mhm.
Superman the movie, of that shot of Martha looking out at Clark out in the field at sunrise. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, in this version, I guess they were Cheerios on that table. So yeah, little stuff like that. Well, the one, not even like a normal thing that would be a world change between two Earths, but as you said, the line reading of the night for you. When Adrian was walking around the house, and I texted you in all caps, "My dad's not gay here." Like that was
Just
fantastic.
the throwaway nature for which he's, like, so bemused by that
Well, his
is
stream
just
of consciousness from getting out behind the bush to till he finds himself, just everything he's saying out loud is phenomenal the whole time.
well, just like he's so, he's just so, like, tickled by everything that he's seeing.
Yeah.
I've certainly had, as we all do, moments where you're just, like, so bemused by your own little world that you have created that you're just capable of living in that and having fun in that. But for
Mhm.
for him, again, to, I think, narrativize his internal monologue in that way is fun. I wonder if that was ADR'd or if he was actually speaking through the mask and they were
I
following
don't
around
yeah,
with a
I
boom
wondered
mic.
the
Like, that's just from a logistical standpoint, that'd be funny to know.
I wondered
But
the exact same thing.
um,
Uh,
yeah, I mean, I
I'm
think
s
this is a strong episode, even with, again, knowing where the episode ends up. Like, it doesn't invalidate. Also, this is the second time we're gonna mention this, but, like, real weapons energy of Adebayo just running from the crowd, not as,
yeah.
like, cleverly framed, I think, as having, like, the lawnmower guy, right? But,
No,
like,
but that over the hill shot
over the hill shot.
of the mask
Big
coming.
big week for Hills too, by the way. There's, like, an amazing, I promise I won't continue to just talk about it, but I finished my review of it last night, so I've been thinking about it a lot. But there's an amazing sequence at the end of one battle after another that's a car chase through Highway 76 in the California desert that involves just these rolling hills, and there's a
Nice.
lot of really smart stuff with how, uh, Paul Thomas Anderson frames those sequences, where a lot of the tension comes from seeing which car in this car chase is going to come up over the top of the hill first. and then how and just the verticality of for which the if you're not watching on video, you can see my hand. I've done this like 5 times now, but my hand going up and down with these like ocean waves of these rolling hills in the California desert. And so it reminded me a little bit of that, just seeing like that's always such a great gag is framing it from the bottom part of a hill and then seeing somebody come up the crest of it and what happens behind all of that is that's just to your point, that's great Looney Tunes energy. I love it so much.
I I wonder how easily she's gonna get away from that. Obviously, Vigilante's tied up talking to himself.
But
Economos is
maybe not.
stabbed to the floor. Yeah, maybe not.
But
Maybe he's
maybe,
coming
we
in.
cut away from that sequence pretty quickly. It's one of those things that maybe there's an understanding very, very quickly of what's happened and both vigilantes show up to save the day in quick order. And, I think there's something, maybe Keith gets away in that moment, but other people were not as lucky. I mean, I would not put it past Gunn to start, or whoever the director is for episode 7, but Gunn writing these to start that episode with an absolute bloodbath at
Mhm.
the
I
hands of
mean, there's gonna have
vigilante.
to be one at some point, and
Oh yeah,
obviously, it
multiple
the
coming.
yes, it looks like there's one that happens that trailer, it looks like there is one that happens in the, Smith household
Yeah,
where you were talking about Vigilante standing guard over Adebayo. It does look like, Peacemaker and Harcourt get away, from, uh, Argus, but are ultimately surrounded by police on the peace cycle. She's holding on to him very tightly and seems very happy. Surely they're like, "Okay, well, let's get out of here." Like, maybe he's
yeah,
agreed to go home at this
yeah.
point, seeing how bad things are. But obviously, they're also splintered, so it's not just as easy for them to. I keep waiting for him to drive that motorcycle through the house, through the bedroom, and through the door, so he can have it on his Earth. But then they're ultimately flanked by Augie and Keith
Yeah,
too that confront him, which is not going to go well now that John has spilled the beans that he killed
yeah.
their Chris.
I
So
also do, I don't think we can necessarily bring that suit back knowing kind of what it stands for, but I do like the Earth X version of the Peacemaker suit quite a bit. I think the long sleeves just work a little bit better for the long sleeves and the jetpack work a
mhm,
little bit better for me than the short
I
sleeves
agree.
and the khakis. I don't know, maybe we can do a reduxed version of that that kind of combines the two in an interesting way, but yeah,
I like the darker as well.
I do too. I mean, tonally works for that, knowing what it is now at this point,
Right.
but we'll see. I also feel like we're gonna get some sort of Chekhov's Peacemaker helmets, considering all of those are sitting outside.
Hmm.
It feels like they've mentioned that too many times to not have Chris grab some of those and use them accordingly.
Just a throwaway thing, but I wanted to ask what you thought because it was funny to me. But when they run into that alien in the bleed, that this is
I
the
love the little callbacks of that where it's just like it's so reflective of Gunn's humor, where it's like something that comes across as like a really just throwaway funny gag in the moment is then something else that people pick up on. Just like the
hmm
back and forth, almost like screwball who's on first energy of just
hmm
going back and forth over like, I don't know, it could be you killed your brother or killed your dad or like whatever
right.
the exact minutia of it is. I can't quite remember at this particular moment, but like, yeah,
And then
just
and then you've got Adrian like I helped incinerate his body, just
yeah.
the high end comedy of that. But I had this thought when the alien walked out, and I loved this is one of Steve's best outings as Economos in this
The
episode, in
xenomorph
my
reference?
opinion. The xenomorph reference, but just obviously the thing walks out, he's like, "Oh Jesus Christ!" Like he's immediately freaked out by it. And then what did he well, there was another thing he did that I was just like, God, he was so oh, the vomiting thing,
The retching after
the
the
retching
yeah.
after because this place is too weird. Um, but I was also like, I wonder if these doors are really instrumentally tied to these characters at all. Like, what if that alien is that Earth's version of Peacemaker or something? Like,
Oh, yeah.
that's another doppelganger. Uh, I just had that funny thought that we brought him back for a hat trick, and I wonder if we'll see him yet again or not. But it
He's gotta show up in the midst of what I assume will likely be a sequence with either Keith and Augie chasing
uh-huh,
Peacemaker crew through the bleed
yeah,
and or Argus going through the bleed, like, he's gotta show up. I think
mhm,
we have to have a Tim Meadows, like, what the heck is that thing
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
conversation with him and our friendly alien, or not so friendly alien rather.
yeah,
And it would be really funny if Flurry's the one that finally gets him to say hello for whatever reason.
yeah.
That would be just a fun button there. But yeah, just great stuff. It's one of those things I feel like Economos, having seen several kaiju at this point and having like been around all of the creature commandos and including the Bride of Frankenstein and all these different other
Mhm.
critters, would like at some point get used to some of this stuff. But a
Still
funny
weirded
trait
out
that
by
he's
it.
just like perpetually weirded out by everything.
Yeah, yep. Is that it?
I think we hit
Did we get
everything.
through everybody? Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we did too. There were a lot of moving pieces in this one. It did not s it felt like it was 5 minutes long to me.
flew by, flew
Yeah,
by.
absolutely, and I've not seen running times on these last 2. I would hope, we're closer to 50-minute marks, than
Yeah,
we
I would
have been
assume
the
the
last
finale is
2
is like
weeks.
45-50 minutes for
Yeah.
sure.
Do you wanna put out theories for the finale? You wanna wait till 7? I don't even know what
No,
to hypothesize at this point.
I mean, Gunn said we're still seeing a bunch of DC characters at some point, right? So I've got to
Mhm,
imagine that is probably like we joked about the Ben Affleck Kite Man situation. I've got
mhm.
to imagine that is when Argus gets in, is opening those doors. That's cameo central there, and it's a bit of fleeting. Is that we're just gonna they're Flurry's gonna open up all these different doors and we're gonna see a bunch of different characters that way. I would imagine if that's how we're gonna get it, that's how it will be done. I
Yeah,
don't know, maybe it's with Judo Master kind of going through the history, we'll see different characters in that regard, but that is the one thing I will predict, is that we still have those to come. So that's maybe the way that we get, maybe that's the way that we get confirmation of, you know, Margot Robbie or
sure.
Idris Elba coming back, or some of the surviving cast members from the Suicide Squad, are quick just notions of that. But um, yeah, we'll see. At this point, I don't want to make any big sweeping predictions for anything. I think I'm pretty content at this point to go along for the ride.
Yeah, I'm the same way. The only thing I have, or the specifically was gonna ask you about, because another thing from the director's commentary that was Peacemakers related was during the cameo where he's on the talk show and Superman comes flying in the window. Gunn, of course, is like, this is a moment everybody laughs at. Every time he's seen it in the theater, everybody laughs at it. But he did specifically state, he said Peacemaker does not like, he is not a fan of Superman's. And of course we heard a little of that in season 1, but uh he said that will come into play, his not being a fan of Superman's. And I thought it was interesting too when Flag brought him up to Lex and Luthor asked if he was Meta or not, and
Yeah,
that he's just so low level that he's not even a blip on the radar to
I was going to say
Lex.
does not even register
Doesn't
to
even
Lex in
register
any way.
just another costume vigilante in a host of cities of costume vigilantes. But given that he does go out of his way in the director's commentary, it's also really weird to have a director's commentary land between 2 episodes of something that's going to really hinge on, like, there's a lot of moving pieces between Superman's rollout of releases between HBO Max and digital, and how it impacts Peacemaker. It's just a very odd
Yeah.
thing.
Also, too, to like have that in 25 years, as somebody's going through and watching Superman and listening to this, and they're
Yeah,
making references to this show, which like I don't know, stuff gets pulled down from streaming all the
all
time,
the
right? Like,
time.
and that's not to say that they would do that with Peacemaker, but at the same time, it's like it's weird to sort of like, I don't know. This is a conversation I think we can save towards the end of the season, is
Sure.
the potential DCU homework conversation. I've already seen some people positing that we're getting into like MCU like homework territory here. I have my own thoughts about that we'll touch on, I think, maybe with that conversation. But bit of a weird choice to kind of just be like in the midst of this thing that is supposed to be, in theory, something that could live autonomously, to tether it as like Easter eggs for a podcast almost, like.
I guess it's more the problem to me with Marvel has been, yes, homework should be done, but then you do the homework and you're like, why did I do the homework? Because it's
The
all become very disconnected, and this one
Yeah.
feels very connected. But
Well,
it also kind of feels like you're happier for having done the homework, but you're not left
mhm.
behind if you didn't do it.
Yeah, I think
you're not going to flunk the test.
We'll save this for a larger discussion, but I think I will quickly say, I think my problem with Marvel has been the sort of like, this is all important, and then it doesn't really matter, but you're insisting that everything is important. So at some point it's like, if you're telling me all of this is important, then nothing's actually important. If
Right.
every single little disparate thing is like,
how many
brick
codas
in building this. Yeah.
Were we never going to get a payoff to at this point?
I mean, that's a piece I've joked about writing for GQ, is like how, and every site has done a version of that, but it's like all the different stingers that just like haven't paid off at this point. Like, we're
I
gonna
don't
get
see
more
Hercules
of a resolution
showing back up. Yeah.
Or even just
all
like
those kinds
Hulk
of things.
and his son. Like, Hulk's gonna be in Brand New Day, but like, we're not getting Scar in that. Like, what do we do?
No.
Anyway, we'll save this conversation for another day.
That's neither here nor there, but I say all that to say, with that reference in the director's commentary, with 2 more episodes remaining, now having seen Holt show up as Lex, knowing that we were, side by side filming the 2 of these in Atlanta at the same time, do you think David will show up as Superman?
I like the idea of him showing up as, Ultraman, or like truly showing up as like Nazi Superman, basically, or kind of like a version of Red Sun Superman, basically. I think that gives Peacemaker his kind of ability to talk about how much he doesn't like Superman. I would love to see a situation where maybe Cornsweat doesn't play yet a third different version of Superman. That feels like maybe a little bit too much at that point, but yeah, I mean, I think I'm more inclined to believe that we're going to get David in this now, given the fact that we did get Holt. Like, that seems more on the table as an opportunity. Let me put it this way. I think if I was betting on this, I would bet yes far quicker than I would have 5 weeks ago.
I would say anybody, if Lex shows up, then anybody is game to show up.
100%.
From that movie. And, whether or not it be David and Rachel, I would absolutely love that. Probably realistically not. I think at the most we would get David. I think getting a Daily Planet team or anything like that is probably a big ask. If anything more than just a passing shot or montage or something they filmed very quickly, but anything of meat of a guest starring role in an episode, I don't see that.
I would
really
agree.
coming to fruition. But I think all the seeds are there for David at this point. And that if 8 does get even crazier, I got some trailers to go back and watch and see what, especially by the end of 7, and see what has transpired and what hasn't by this point. Because
I'm sure someone on Reddit has already cut together a sort of like, here is what was in the trailers that we haven't seen yet. I'm sure that post is, if it's not there, it's coming imminently.
Yeah. So we'll see. In the meantime, you can always subscribe and listen to us wherever you get your podcast. Just search The House of L, and we are there, as we have been for 20 years. And you can find us online, superhouseofl.com, or any place you do your social media. We are at superhouseofl, and you can email us mail@superhouseofl.com. And so 2 more episodes. I've really enjoyed doing this with you. I appreciate you coming on and getting to talk about it. It's been too long since you've been on Shoe anyway. So
I know. I'll be your Huckleberry for all things Peacemaker. Although I'm gonna elbow my way in to talk about Lanterns at some point, I think.
Yeah, we got to do that too. I'm really excited for Lanterns and excited to see more stuff for that. I'm excited for season 3 of My Adventures with Superman. Robin and Frank are going to be back covering that with me whenever we get an announcement for that return, which we still haven't. It's been far too long since season 2 ended, so excited for that. And then this DVD having just come out for Superman has brought all that back around for me. We're so close to Supergirl and the filming of Man of Tomorrow. It just feels like we're nonstop on this train now. So all of it really makes me smile. So we'll be back to discuss episode 7, the final 2 hours of 2 episodes. We don't know how long they're going to be of the season. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.